August. But so the idea is that those most likely will need to include outside funding, federal funding. For instance, with the Rapid Transit Project, there's a big source of federal funds that could be used for that type of project. It's called Small Starts. And so that would likely be a source of up to 80% of the costs for that project. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thanks. Or we scale back some of those things. I mean, ideally, right. we find the grants.
Ready? All right. Okay. Good morning. We are looking for approval from the Board of Directors on the Transportation Improvement Program for 2024 through 2029. As Tim said, this is sort of a subset of the CIP. It's required by the FTA and WSDOT to secure federal funding, even to apply for federal funding for any of these projects. So we document the projects that are of regional significance and the ones that we're looking for potential FTA funding. This gets approved by our board, and then it goes to the COG, approved for them, and then it moves through to the state tip and the federal tip. And until it is through that process, we are unable to apply for federal funds for the projects. As Tim said, there's no fiscal impact to this document either. It's a planning tool, and we update it every year so that the projects may change, the costs may change, and there is an opportunity throughout the year to amend the document if we need to with the COG. So page 3 really kind of lays out the 6-year program, and you can see the 5th column has either S's or P's, so either secured funding or planned funding. We're optimistic, and we have a lot of P's in here for planned funding coming in, but it does include many of the projects Tim talked about that have costs that aren't completely determined yet out in the 3 out years, but it's a very robust plan that we're looking for approval for today.
All right, discussion.
The TAP does have a public hearing component of it.
All right, should we open the public hearing? 8:12, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone from the public who would like to address the board? Doesn't look like it. Further discussion from the board?
I guess I look at bus rapid transit, 28 million. Like we try to do something to get ridership out of people to spend that kind of money on special routes to go fast.
Yeah, that's
Got it.
Is that a question?
Yeah, that's a question.
Okay.
How do we justify that kind of money?
Yeah, that's a fair question given the ridership situation. I was talking to Mary yesterday about current situation, and actually she did share with me that it actually has increased up to about 75% of the 2019. So we still see those incremental gains happening. So we're hopeful that it'll continue gaining, but obviously there's a lot of uncertainty right in the future with that. But I think our fundamental premise is that is when you get to a higher level of frequency, that's kind of the number one quality that people are looking for in a transit service, that you begin to increase the service then. But and we have a kind of a service that is considered high frequency, but it's not to the level at which people can use it very easily without barriers. You know, you can't just hop on a bus. You still have to look at the schedule, right? And so when you get to a certain level of service, then you remove some of those barriers that make it much easier. So that's the idea with the rapid transit service, is that it's such a higher quality that people are willing to use it despite the constraints, because right now we're competing with automobile, very difficult, right? And so when you get to a service that is able to compete, then you can start to attract that ridership. But there's a lot of uncertainty with that, right? That's an assumption, that's a theory that we've seen in other cases that's been successful, but we'll have to look at that, right? We'll have to determine if, as we move forward, that is the right place to make the investment.
And I assume this is in Bellingham somewhere that you do this.
Correct, yeah. And I think the other thing that we see is that once you provide that core backbone, it can then enhance other services. So for example, from Linden, coming in, then people because people would typically want to transfer to get to their ultimate destination, that they could use this very robust service, not have to wait another 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That's a barrier to passengers. So that's the theory.
And that's one singular rapid line for 28 million.
That is correct.
When you said that 75% of 2019, so are we targeting that we should get back to a ridership prior to COVID?
Yeah.
Is that our target?
Well, we don't have a target per se, right? I think it's more in the monitoring, but we are kind of working on other aspects of access. We call it access to opportunity, right? How do we reframe the needs out there beyond just kind of a ridership scenario? Because we don't know what the right ridership is. There isn't kind of a magic ridership number for us. Obviously, if you see ridership growth, that's healthy, right? But we feel that there are other aspects that are important to emphasize. So are we providing, are we addressing the equity component that was identified in WTA 2040 adequately? So are we getting people to the places they need, right? And you'll see next month, or maybe actually later this month, some metrics around that we produce, where we're kind of measuring what that access to opportunity is. So that's another dimension that we're looking at. It's not just about ridership; it's about getting people to the places they need to go, and then using other tools like on-demand service, transportation demand management, looking at land uses to have a more holistic approach to transit.
I have one more question about rapid transit.
Just hopping on the ridership is that I always worry when I hear about ridership that it's an indicator, but not necessarily an outcome. Because if you wanted to just have higher ridership, you could target certain high ridership areas and say, hey, that's great, but you could lose the equity piece and so forth. So it's an indicator, but it's not the outcome. So it's not your goal is to have high ridership. It's how does that balance with equity, with the environment, with these other things, and it's an important piece. But I would argue that it's not the end all, because if it is, we could just run buses at Western all day and get a lot of ridership. But does that really mean we're providing help to solve problems?
Yeah, but we're not leaving people stranded either. So if we run more buses west, there are only so many people who ride the bus.
Would help me.
It won't necessarily increase the ridership, but overall, why people are not using that much buses, like that. And I don't know everybody knows or not, there's a letter out there, you get a copy of that. So I think that kind of thing is going to come out. Of course, it's political season, so there may be some aspects of that, but I think there will be more discussion on this.
And the 17th of August, that's exactly why we pulled this together.
Let's talk about the rapid transit thing. So when we say we need to improve on rapid transit, I think we need to look into this thing. How many people need rapid transit every 10 minutes or faster? If there are only 5 people every 10 minutes, you don't need one 40 passenger bus to create a rapid transit, unless the buses have more substantial people. Rapid transit means that there's a certain segment of our population who need to get to that destination faster, or they don't want to wait on the bus stop for more than X minutes, whatever your criteria is, right? How many of them are? And I brought up before as well, why don't we look at that Uber idea? I went to Friday Harbor just last week. There was a Washington State Transportation Commission meeting in our district. So I went there and talked to them, and I gave them the same thing, and they really liked it. And there was the Assistant Secretary of Transportation there. There was Public Works Assistant Secretary was there, and of course, all the commission was there. I said, we have to start looking 20 years ahead, not what we have and how to incrementally improve that. We have to actually think of transformation. And that's what we needed. Like if you add X number of rolling stock to do the rapid transit, and still only certain people you're serving, why can't we serve them with a smaller vehicle or some other way? Make it all rapid transit. I mean, I think this is going to be an important subject. And
Yeah, and we are experimenting with that, as you know, the Linden Hawk, and that has been successful. But I think we have to keep in mind that that carries a very small percentage of the need. So we're carrying upwards of 60 people a day. You compare that with our high frequency service, and there's really no comparison, right? You can provide many more rides on those vehicles than we can on an on-demand vehicle. It's just a question of the size of the vehicle, the number of vehicles, right? And so it's much more efficient for us to provide that larger vehicle. And so you get into a question of where's the right balance and where is one appropriate and one is not. We still believe that the rapid bus is the future in some cases, but in other cases it might be that on-demand vehicle where we don't have as many people riding, and so you can provide them on a smaller vehicle, right, and a much more flexible service. So I think those things work together in our minds moving forward. So that's and I think that's checking in with the board. Is that what you see as transformation? Is that what you see as the future too?
the other part comes up with that, the equity part. Somebody wants a rapid transit, are they willing to pay for that? Or are we taking money from others and making some people privileged people, right or wrong word, that they are getting rapid transit, right? Or are they willing to pay more? That's another thing we got to start thinking about. Because that's an equity question. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm maybe a little confused about rapid transit because I was under the impression you carve out lanes so that the bus can get through quicker, not necessarily adding more buses to the service. Or is it both?
I think it's both, right? The way that, and you will see this in August when we do our presentation, but it's both. It's defining it in a way that reflects the community needs and the opportunities, right? And so every service will look different. What you see in King County Metro may be different than what you see in Everett, is what you see in Whatcom County. So in our minds, it combines both the frequency. Again, I think that 10-minute service is sort of the key area from what we can tell, and then adding where there are opportunities to provide, transit lanes, queue jumps, transit signal priority, those other things to help speed up the bus, to help make it operate more efficiently. And because the opposite is what we had to do a few years ago, and that is the same level of service, we were adding buses for the same level of service. We were paying more, provide the same level of service. So we also want to avoid that situation where we're stuck in traffic too, with our existing service and spending more just for that same level.
Just really quick, I realized I forgot to close the public hearing. Sorry, Vicki. So keep going.
All right, one question. So on the rapid transit, I know in the plan there was like a small, medium, large approach. Is the 28 million basically the most robust version of the rapid transit?
Oh, that's a good question. Again, we'll talk about this in August, but yeah, there are basically three approaches. One is the full-on bus rapid transit that assumes a lot of changes, an enhanced version that increases service and doesn't quite do as many things, right? It could be a lower cost version, and then one that is just basically doing some minor improvements on the route. So yeah, you're correct. So it could be scaled depending on the outcome of the study, the outcome of the board's direction with the study.
Any other discussion, questions? Motion?
Move to approve the TIP.
Second.
All right, move in a second. Any other further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right.
Was that also for the CIP?
Oh,
That'll be a separate vote.
Separate, okay, I didn't.
yes, that's the next thing.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Item E1, consideration of approval of the capital improvement plan. Also, Tim.
Yeah, that's what Shonda presented
Oh,
with it, so it kind of goes together.
okay. Any other questions about that one?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Right, comments, questions? Discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, sorry, that was confusing. Then E2. What is happening here? Seth, can you mute? Consideration to set a public hearing on the transportation development plan.
Yeah, it's just, our recommendation is to set the hearing. This is and we'll do a formal presentation on this in August, but this is the annual state required transit development plan that identifies some of the things you've seen, sort of the budget, the funding, service changes we might be proposing, the capital elements. And so it basically rolls together all the sort of the components that you see in one form or another throughout the year. Our requirement is to do this by the end of August. So we have to get it approved in August. So it does require a public hearing. So I think this is sort of the latest date that we can go forward and still get it approved for the state. So again, we'll do a more formal presentation in August on this. We're still working on the draft report, not finalized yet. So,
What would the date of the public hearing be?
August 17th.
I'll move we set the TDP hearing for August 17th. Second.
All right. Any other discussion, questions? All in favor of setting the meeting for August 17th, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, for the public hearing. All right. Item F, consent agenda.
Move approval.
Like today.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And consent agenda approved. Item G, reports to the board. Let's see, we have Maureen McCarthy with mission statement.
All right, thank you. Today we're going to focus on our fourth bullet on our mission statement, and since I'm in the room, I'll just read it. It's partnering with our community to improve transportation systems. So under the heading of partnership, I just want to focus on three types very quickly. The first is partnering in order to fill gaps in our existing, or fill gaps to improve access to our existing transportation network. And a couple of examples of that would be our Transit Access Fund. As you may recall, we're partnering with both Lummi Nation and the city of Nooksack to focus on areas that those two entities have identified where there is existing transit service and there are people who need it, and there's just a gap there that we can help them fill by providing these relatively small grants to help them complete their projects. In addition to those two, we will also be going out, I believe, this month for a second round of Transit Access Fund grant funding and hope to find new partners for that. We're also working with the Whatcom COG on smart trips. As you know, we have been partners with the COG on smart trips since 2006, and it is such a beautiful example of improving access to the existing network, because we have in the COG professionals who go out and work with employers, with seniors, with schools, with commuters, really with anyone who would like, to help them understand how transportation infrastructure in the form of transit, trails, walking, biking, ride sharing, it could become part of their sort of transportation solution. So not only are we partnering with them in all the ways we always have, but we also helped them to, or applied on their behalf for a Washtenaw Regional Mobility Grant for over $800,000 for the next 4 years. So our continuing and strengthening our partnership there. The second type of partnership I wanted to hire is in the realm of some of these transformational projects we've talked about. One of them is the next on our agenda, actually, the potential housing development at Linden Station. And another is our Bellingham Station. So these are things that could help improve the transportation network by locating more people near transit. And while we're at it, maybe locating other services there too. So our partners in Linden, you'll hear about in a moment when we talk about that station. And for Bellingham Station, our main partners there are the City of Bellingham, the Downtown Bellingham Partnership, Western. We also had great participation in our visioning process from the United Way, from some of our riders, from the health department, and from business owners nearby. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight a neat partnership that sort of grew out of our conversation with some of the stakeholders in Linden, and that was our Farm Workers to Food pilot. As you know, we will be providing transportation for just a handful of days, you know, the sort of the growing season. I think it's 10 Wednesdays this summer. And if we're successful in being able to connect farm workers to this food bank site, that will not only mean a lot to those people who are getting that service, but it's also going to provide us with some information that may inform a conversation we're having about how we deliver zone service. So it's useful, that partnership will be useful in that way. Any questions?
Questions, comments?
Partnership, like what are we doing with like Western and Whatcom Community College? They're separate type of partnerships.
Yes, yeah. Since I didn't want to keep you here all day, I just
Okay.
chose a sliver of partnerships to focus on. But yes, I mean, the biggest aspect of our partnership with each of those probably has to do with our past programs, but there are other ways we work with both the colleges, or both of those two colleges on partnership as well. That's always the trick. Only highlights.
All right, moving on to G2, Linden Station update. Les?
Yes, yeah, thank you. So as you recall, we've been thinking of transformational projects that help, one, help service, but also while also creating those partnerships that Maureen mentioned, to help create a transportation network that helps our community solve problems that are out there. One of the ideas that came up that we had mentioned last year was looking at the Linden Park and Ride station there, an underutilized piece of property. It had been, and you can see up on here, for orientation purposes, on the far left side is the guide, and then Front Street across the top there. And then that yellow highlighted area is the property that WTA owns. You can see where it was developed for the park and ride. Over the last about 20 years of that, it hasn't really performed as envisioned with the park and ride. So it was, how do we have a higher and better use of that property, or is there a higher and better use of that? So what we were thinking as we went through that is, okay, what's the strategic concept and foundation for that? And we thought about transit supported development out there, where you're keeping the transit component of it, but you're bringing people to transit and transit to people by putting housing out in that area, which then enhances the service component while also enhancing the transportation network to help solve problems. So the outcomes that we've identified we're looking for across the system include things like increased accessibility and mobility that would come with having people located at the transit, greater independence, community vibrancy of activating those areas, better environmental outcomes with transit demand management that Maureen talked about on that. And hopefully it helps people keep more money in their pocket. They may not need a second car if they're there, which definitely saves money. So looking at that, we felt like there was a strategic foundation in the concept, or to move the concept forward to take a look. So we've spent the first 6 months this year in doing a needs assessment to validate, is this a good idea? Does it make sense to do that? So I'll turn it over to Maureen. She led the stakeholder outreach. And if you wouldn't mind talking about all the folks we talked to validate this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so we have had a number of appointments with quite a few partners. Our favorite is the City of Linden. That's our number one partner in this project, but we've also talked to farm workers themselves and organizations that represent farm workers. We've spoken to quite a few different nonprofits, including the Food Bank and Agape, and a couple that actually build and manage housing projects for agricultural workers. Puget Sound Energy, the Community Foundation. We've also spoken to the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. And as we sort of waded into every conversation with this idea that Les just mentioned in mind, it became really clear that there are a lot of people who have already identified workforce housing, and particularly farm worker housing, as a very, very, very significant need out there. And in some ways, they've just been sort of waiting for someone to come forward with a possible property. So it's been really encouraging in that sense. A lot of people are really very excited about it. And so that's where we are.
I have a question. How big it is going to be? 20 apartments, 50?
12 stories. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah,
That's all right.
I just got nervous.
So the total property on there is about 3.5 acres. And so what the step is that we've identified to answer that question. We've hired RMC architects to do a massing study on that, look at the geotech aspect of it. How many units could you put on there with parking requirements, open space requirements, and those things. So we will have an answer for you by October on that.
Is one of the intention to roof over the whole thing and do all the property, or just that vacant lot?
So what? No, it would be the whole thing. But we need to keep a transit aspect to it. So that's part of the due diligence as well. What we're doing is we're not proposing the WTA way into developing and putting in housing, but rather do a RFQ process, request for qualification process, get a good team that then would do that. We'd have elements that we would need to be included in that, and then they would design with the city on what does that look like.
The public-private partnership and invite investors to come and build it. And
what the ones that have expressed interest would be more nonprofit for workforce housing that are used to turning those into workforce housing. So what we would, and this was, I was going to move on to the what the next steps are, because this is kind of a check-in to see, is the board still interested in us moving this forward? But what we do is this massing study with RMC to kind of answer some of those questions. What would it look like? How many units could you put on there with what kind of services, open space, geotech, those kinds of things, make sure it's a buildable position. So finish that by November 1st. And then what we propose to do is in the budget for next year, go out for an RFQ, request for qualifications, beginning of first quarter of next year. See what teams come in. We imagine we would hear from a few of that affordable housing or workforce housing.
I just wanted to quickly share with everybody what we are talking to a lot of people, private developers, is create an affordable component rather than having all 100% affordable. extract more money and more partners, it could be that if it is 50% affordable, the other 50% would be for investment. Nobody would know which partner is for the affordable part, and which partner is the other one, right? But it's the attract capital because it's not only affordable housing that is an issue, just the supply of housing is a bigger issue. And that if private people, investors, developers are willing to do that, then we say to them, and that's what we're doing in EDI. We are going as low as 20%. If you put in 20% affordable housing in your project, you become eligible to get some funding programs, right? And I think that this is a very prime property, and it could be like once you develop it, if you underdevelop it, it's done forever.
Correct. And I'm sorry, I wasn't articulate. That's part of what RMC is looking at is all of those. We're at very beginning stages, recognizing from other developments that I've done that many times it's the middle housing that is the key component to that we need to work on. But we don't know where that all shakes out at this
My
point.
understanding was, what catching me was that, we are talking to some nonprofits because then we are limiting the pool of money you need. To me, I think we should be talking to anybody who wants to invest money, but we are putting 1 or 2 or 3 conditions that this is how components of the project should be.
Right. And that was my fault for being inarticulate.
We are on the same
That
page.
is, so we don't know. We're not trying to, at this point, we're trying to figure out what that is, how many units could you get on that, which could drive some of those things. We need to sit down and really look at the zoning code, work with the city on what they want.
The difficulty we are facing with nonprofits is their cycle for getting money is very difficult, and it's becoming more and more difficult because there's more and more people for that money, that kind of thing. But if you do public-private, and half of the funding can come from private sector, right?
Right.
And then it becomes easier, project becomes wider. But we have so much money already, we need this much. And
Yes.
just wanted
Yeah.
to-
Thank you. Yeah. No, I appreciate the emphasis on it. I guess before I go any further, I'll pause, see if Mayor Cortez has any from a Linden.
No, we're looking forward to seeing what it's gonna look like. I think filling the site with higher density would be good, and it's in an ideal location for it because it's near shopping and near other services in the area that would be good. I guess we're looking forward to some lower cost housing because a lot of our employers in the area need that kind of housing for their workers. So both the ag community and like the Linden Doors of the world need that kind of work to attract. So having them closer to work would be good for them.
So the next steps if the board, you don't have to vote, but if just kind of a head nod is good. We'll continue with the massive study between now and beginning of November. Put into the budget for next year the resourcing to be able to do the RFQ, and then we'd enter into probably a ground lease with long-term ground lease. So resourcing that to be able to negotiate that, and then turn the property over. Probably the goal would be towards the end of next year, like next fall. And again, I just want to stress that there still would be the transit component to this. We're not getting into the housing business, that it's still it would still be transit. And then to where these things, all these transformative things come together, is how does the Linden Hop and how do we do that play with serving Linden and then the more fixed line, fixed route service. And so there's a lot of connection among these various projects, trying to keep it to create that transportation network.
All right, anybody online shaking your head, not nodding your head? Looks good.
Thank you very much, and thank you for emphasizing those things. And thanks to the City of Linden, been very open as we've been going through this. Appreciate that.
All right, G3, General Manager's
All
report.
right. So a couple logistical things. One, as the board has directed, no meeting on August 3rd, but we'll do the longer meeting on the 17th. idea, and that is the 8 to 9 would be the regular business meeting, and then 9 to 11:30 would be talking about the strategic framework, where we're headed, the ridership, the BRT, how these things all work together, our value proposition to the committee or to the community in a transforming world, and what can we do to still provide great, safe, friendly, efficient, reliable service while also proving value to create a transportation network that helps communities solve problems. So that's for August. Also, I think everybody's aware now, it's been passed along, but we did receive a low-no grant from the FTA for 9.6 for 11 hybrids, pursuant to our zero emission fleet transition study. That helps us buy that decision space to figure out which technology we will go to. So we appreciate the FTA and the boards on that. Do want to emphasize again, just as this is a public meeting, that we're, even though that buys us decision space, we're still under either technology way that we go, we're still on track to have the last diesel out of service in 2036 and the last hybrid in 2039, meeting the board's directed 2040 goal on that. Piece of good news, the state audit is officially complete. We had the exit interview on the 29th. For the record, there was no quorum, so it wasn't a public meeting. But thanks to a few board members who did, Ellen and Scott, who did hop on. We got our 26th consecutive clean audits. It was another great partnership with the state auditor's office. As we mentioned in the past, thanks to Shonda and Aaron for leading the effort, but the entire WTA staff for throughout the year doing a great job in keeping track of things and complying with those internal controls and things. So that was good news. Our TSOs, our transit safety officers are on board and finishing up their training. Still looks like the 9th to get them out, and they're doing field training now. That as a reminder, those are the 4 folks we hired to be eyes and ears out on the concourses, on the buses, riding around, deployed to our high frequency areas that we're identifying, that Jeff has worked so hard to figure out how to best deploy them. So they're doing field training now, and then we'll be out on the 9th. Well, that's good news. Yesterday, Representative Larson came to visit. Thanks to Scott for being there. We talked about, obviously, thanked him for the low-no, his big support on that. We talked about federal partnership opportunities, and then talked about this safe, friendly, reliable service, while also trying to look at transformational efforts to create a transportation network to help communities solve problems, what that means, and what his thoughts are. And he was pretty supportive of those things. So, anything you want to add? No. And then last thing, a fun thing, just a reminder, August 2nd, WTA Bellingham Bells. That evening, you should have received an email if you want a ticket for that. So that's exciting. So pending any questions, that's it for my report.
We're going to approve the transportation development plan at that 17th meeting, but would it be better to have the dialogue and then approve the plan? Because we're going to approve a plan and then hear about future plans, right?
Oh,
I'm just wondering if we did it in reverse order, if we'd be more educated on that.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Oh, sorry, but that does make sense to do the from 8 to 10:30 that discussion, and 10:30 to 11:30 would be the business meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be, yeah.
Does that sound okay? Okay. Thank you. That's a great idea.
All right, any other business?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
A lot of other business.
Just as I was driving into the meeting today, coming up on the Hannigan, I've avoided the Hannigan because of all the construction on Mount Baker Highway. So I apologize for dashing in the last minute, took a little longer. I'm wondering about the flexibility of WTA to enhance service when there are major construction projects like that. I'm just seeing so much anguish and stress around transportation with that major project going on the Mount Baker Highway. And then the state is also going to be closing East Pole Road in August for a culvert replacement to abate some flooding issues. But those projects will be happening at the same time, and then it will close another avenue from the county to town. So I'm just wondering about is there a way that WTA can help with some of that? I mean, Smith, the corner of Smith and Hannigan is an absolute disaster in the morning, and probably at 5 o'clock when people are heading back out to Linden and wherever. So just wondering about kind of flexibility and ability to enhance service for, you know, a couple months with that.
I think the answer is yes, we can look into it,
So,
but
yeah, I think that's the best thing we can do right now.
Yeah.
is look into it. What we haven't heard is a lot of demand signals from the community
Okay.
about needing more bus service.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say the demand is there. Nobody's reading. This is the first actual comment that we've had about, hey, what might it look like to have more bus service? I think theoretically it makes a lot of sense. I don't know if the ridership demand is there to increase the service, but there's potentially some opportunities to actually highlight the service that we have. And hey, tired of sitting at the light at Smith and Hannigan, off the bus.
Yeah.
And which, you know, the adage is that's great for everybody else. If everybody else is on the bus, I don't have to sit in traffic, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
But we look at that. One of the things we're facing right now, which is challenging for us, is we have an operator shortage right now, and so our ability to provide additional service is limited. Just from a staffing standpoint.
And I don't know if I'm saying we need to do it right now, but just looking at other potential projects that are even coming up within the city. And I will say, just, you know, coming from rural where there is not as much service, we may not know to ask for it. Is part of it as well. We don't know that we can ask for it, or you know, if 10 people got together, maybe there's a van that we could use to get into town, or whatever that may be. And again, not necessarily with this, but just keeping an eye on what other construction projects may be going on, coming up in the next several years, and
something to that.
And how do we educate people on how to access service and ask for more service? So, yeah.
So there were a lot of different projects which were delayed because of COVID, and state isn't begun to get them done and so on. We would have finished the roundabout on Hannigan and Smith, but one property owner, we needed like half an acre. It took 2 years to convince him. So sometimes things happen that not under control. But what we will do is, I will talk to the public works director, contact WTA, yourself or somebody, any new projects we are doing, count that, okay, why don't you consult with them and say if there's a possibility, right? So we can do it from the county. I think city got to do it from the city perspective, but definitely great idea that if you can do it for a couple of months, we'll do it.
We could figure out some way for WTA to skip the traffic, then we could.
Well, there's $300,000 flying cars now by FTA.
All right, let's look into that. No, just kidding, don't look into that. Any other business?
One more real quick, and Satpal brought it up earlier, the letter from Tim Ferris. And he also mentioned, because it's political season, I think we're gonna be under this like a bit more than we have been on how we spend money and how we're spending money. And I guess part of, in the past, I can recall some information on cost per ride. I guess it would be interesting to know that again. What is the cost per ride on fixed? What's the cost per ride on paratransit? What's the cost per ride on the hop? There might be another one, but anyway, we in the past we got that information. I think it would be good to look at that again, along with everything else that we're looking at, because I think we all know, maybe you don't know, and we get 0.6% sales tax. That's what funds WTA. And of course, what they're bringing up is 0.2 for the jail project. Anyway, we'll be under the spotlight in the next 6 months, just because that group of business people, they probably won't let go.
I think that it has been sent to the media last night, the information I got. So it will get more air and more coverage and everything. But I mean, I think that we should address rather than saying, oh, why you are causing trouble in here or blah, 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 whatever, about jail and all this. That's besides the point. And I think as a body, WTA, we should.
We were already thinking that way, and that's why we had the meeting scheduled on the 17th before we even got the letter.
Exactly. I think that.
Talking
we
about
should
that.
address this.
So we need to prove the value.
That's right.
And people don't see that we are kind of stalling.
Right.
There's a lot of misinformation or not knowing. It's not even misinformation. They don't even know how the WTA works or how the county and state or we put taxes on, taxes off. I think it's, we need to work on it.
And that's the underpinning of the meeting on the 17th, to talk about what is that return on investment? What do I get for my 0.6%?
And issues of equity. If people look at just business perspective, that I'm running a cab company, how I can make more money and all this type of stuff, right? But this is public service, so that component people may not understand. And our mandates are. So I think we have to show the overall why and how we are doing.
Well, and also depending on where it's built.
Yeah.
It could also, it will be incurring more costs there too. If it's not built in town where there's service.
Yeah.
Might
They're
need
gonna
service in order.
Yeah. All right. Other business. Anybody? How about announcements? Ready to adjourn?
Yes.
All right, let's go.
Hey, thank you.